Let's talk about that math, because in the manuscript and using the standards for most of the history of champions, I'm recommending somewhere between 200 and 250 starting points total, which isn't any different mainly from any of the other books that I'm talking about. But then I have to go and do this ratio thing with a recommendation of no higher than 115 for player characters and a recommendation to go big with villains, in this case about 130. What am I even talking about? How come I've introduced this extra math into what admittedly there is already some? So what's that about? Here's what's happening. The name of cost in champions breaks down into the active cost, which is the point cost according to the rules, taking into account any advantages. So it's also, for the case of powers and efforts that use endurance, the amount you use to find out how much. Okay, it's either what it says in the rules, this many dice for this many points, or something like that. And then it is making it bigger. So it only kind of goes up. That's active cost. Then you also have the effect of introducing limitations. Anything that cuts it down through division. And that would be, once you do that math, the real cost. That's called the real cost because you are given X amount of points and you pay for it in real cost. Fine. So if you have no limitations on the character whatsoever, then the active cost and the real cost are the same things. If you have any limitations, then the real cost is going to be lower. So far so good. The one wrinkle in there is the discount of the elemental control, which doesn't count regarding the active to real relationship. Let's take a look at the results of doing such a thing. And if we take a character who is 250 points, and you were to have, for example, if without limitations, the character would be 275 points. With limitations, the character would be, on budget, 250 points. So okay, 275 active cost, 250 real cost, and you can see that it ratio would be 110. So there you are, pretty easy. And compare that to a character whose ratio would be, let's rack it way up there, crazy limitations and crazy, amounts of active cost, and we're suddenly looking at a ratio of 150, and that would mean that, good night, that would mean that there'd be 125 hidden points, if you want to look at it that way, of active cost. So if we look at the example characters throughout all the editions of Champions, their ratios are, by and large, extremely low. Quite a few of them are 100, which means basically no limitations at all. And then only the really, really severe power suit characters, who aren't actually even recommended to be player characters necessarily in that construction, only they tend to have these ratios up above 125. So keep that in mind. If you care about that sort of thing, the game authors really weren't thinking in terms of very high ratios. Is this talking about balance? Yes and no. Yes, because we're talking about the relative contributions of different people at the table and their sense of empowerment in the game. No, because I'm not even sure I know what the word balance means, or I have to ask for major clarification when anyone brings it up. In this case, point for point in this percentage ratio probably doesn't mean very much. I should also point out, not every active point is worth the same as another active point in terms of real play. Some things are about dice of damage, some things are about knowledge gathering and whether that's important in your game or not, that it's going to play a role. In one game, luck and unluck may be enormously important. In another game, they may not, and they certainly aren't the same as points of resistant defense either. So there is a lot of blur here, and I don't want to get too fine-grained about the points of the ratio. Again, the issue has to do with player participation, a sense of player empowerment, and not so much about balance in some kind of really fine-tuned way. What I'm more interested in is skew. Is there a big discrepancy showing up around the table? And, little differences, I've got a ratio of 114, I've got a ratio of 109. I really don't think that matters at all. I'm real interested if everybody's running around at 101, 102, and then someone else is running around at 139. I'm kind of interested in what's going on there and whether those characters are actually interacting in a fashion that we think of as equal player participation. Unless you understand a character's ratio, you're not really looking at the character quantitatively in full. I leave it to you to judge. I leave it to you to think about it. My recommendations of 115 maximum for starting player characters is based on a lot of play experience. Check that out, see what you think. Just don't not look. Try out the math. Tell me what you find at the table.